Finally ready. I'm ready when you are, Brandon.
Okay. Okay. Today is Wednesday, December the 4th. It is 4:00 p.m. Would you please call attendance?
Oh, yes, I will. Otis Edwards,
Here.
Kay Headley,
Here.
Jennifer Travis,
Here.
Gwen Martin,
Here.
Cindy Bell.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Our first item on the agenda is approval of the budget amendment to the Liberty Park pond clearing.
So, we talked about this last night at the council meeting, just so that we had their approval. This was supposed to be more of a routine maintenance item, and it turned out to be a little more labor intensive than expected. I think I made a mistake in accepting an hourly price instead of by the job price. Just because I didn't really expect it to turn into the monster that it did. It was, in my mind, it was necessary to complete the work because we were at the driest period of the entire year. And even at the driest period, I guess you showed them the pictures of all the equipment that we sunk in the pond and the outlying areas of the pond. That next weekend after we completed the work, we had that large rain event, almost 12 inches of rain. What we did completely changed the park. It made certain areas of those ponds way more accessible. People are able to fish, and it just looks 1,000 times better than it did before. Unfortunately, it was way more expensive than I anticipated it to be. I expected it to take about a day's worth of work. They quoted me $275 an hour, so I was thinking that it would be $2,700, $3,000 tops.
I'm sorry, because I have a hearing issue.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing
Okay,
what you're
sorry.
saying.
I can project.
You can pass the mic around if you
And
want.
instead of that $27,000 or $2,700, $3,000 market, it wound up costing around $2,000. Which isn't necessarily the end of the world. I think that we do have room in city sales and use budget to make it happen. It was just, it's kind of daunting that something like that would cost as much as it did.
Has this been in our budget before? Have we been talking about this project?
Nope, and it wasn't necessarily a project until it came out to be so expensive, because this is something that would have been considered maintenance.
Casey, I'm gonna
Yep.
sorry, I'm gonna interject. I'm back here. It would be nice if I'd have had that whole. Casey has prepared an exchange and screenshots of the whole year and a half that he first placed this request with the street department, and they assured him it would be on the list and it keep going, and it just went on and on and on. And I think you guys should see that. I guess I could email it to you, but I didn't think to.
I included some text messages between myself and the street director, and I don't want that to be super public, just because I don't want to sell out. I don't want to sell out my coworkers. Basically, this has been a request from neighbors inside of the park since 2022. They started with the mayor before I was here. And then once I got here, it took about a year and a half for them to reach out to me, and they communicated with me around April of this year. And we have been on the street department's list to complete this since April of this year. And I had tried to remind them or make requests for them to get out there and get the work done at least once a month, sometimes multiple times a month. And it just never, it seemed like it was never going to happen. I finally, kind of in jest, kind of in not, asked the street director if he thought that I should just hire the work outside of the city. And he said, yeah, I don't think that we're going to get to it. Summarizing, yeah, I don't think we're going to get to it. You'd probably be best suited to hire someone outside of the city.
I know in times past, Casey, I've asked, I said something about fishing out there.
Mhm.
And told them we couldn't stock it because it needed to be cleaned out. Is this gonna allow us to stock it now?
Yeah, I think so. And yep, we talked with Ralph some last night too, and he said that if I remember right, that the fish population would benefit from having that extra space from where that vegetation was before. The long-term goal is to have Lucky Strike, or is it Lucky Strike, the lure place out there now? I guess it used to be Norman. Have them sponsor fishing derbies. And if, oh yeah, yep. Yeah, guys are out there fishing when it was warmer. They're out there fishing daily, and they were carving their own spots out of those piles of duckweed. So they would bring their own hand tools out there so that they could reel fish to the bank.
So for clarification purposes, this was just part of our maintenance line. You are not sharing that your concerns with the grass being overgrown over there with us. I don't remember having that conversation.
No, I didn't. If I, in hindsight, if I knew this was going to be as expensive as it turned out to be, it certainly would have been a budgeted project. So this to me is more of a capital project, or nearing a capital project. When you say, I mean,
Yeah.
$10,000
We
is,
wouldn't even have to go to them just because any unbudgeted item that would be considered a project, that is greater than $5,000.
so yeah, to me, it would have, if things would have worked out the way I anticipated them to, with us just being in there for a day, then it certainly would have just been categorized under city sales and use tax, maintenance of parks.
If the city street department had done it, would we have paid them for it? So
But it would have been at a reduced rate. Yeah. This was $275 an hour, which is, in the contracting world, he had a very large excavator and a bulldozer out there doing the work. I can't say it's a bargain because it's still pretty expensive at an hourly rate, but it's not as expensive as it could have been.
Well, I'll make a motion that we accept the resolution, whatever we need to do here.
Yeah, the city council passed it contingent upon Parks Commission approval, and it's on the back of your agenda. It's 2-page. If you need to look at it. So Cindy, you made the motion to accept?
I second the motion.
Jennifer, second. Chair, would you like me to call for the vote?
yes, please.
Mr. Edwards? Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Travis?
Yes.
Mrs. Headley?
Yes.
And Mrs. Bell? It's unanimous.
So I apologize. My lesson learned was that I'll get a project cost instead of charging by the hour next time. Be the smart thing to do. Lesson learned.
Could you also put a hourly rate not to exceed and have but I guess that wouldn't help.
Yeah, and the hard part is that clock's still ticking whenever their excavators get stuck. They're going to give us a little bit of wiggle room, but we were using city-owned dump trucks, and our parks team were driving the trucks. When those dump trucks got stuck, the clock was definitely ticking. So it's things like that really push out those time frames.
Would we keep it clean?
Yep, and that was a question asked last night too. They didn't just scrape off the surface; they scraped to pull that growth out, and then they dug a little bit to actually remove that vegetation. I've been talking to a pond guy, is what I've been calling him, and he's made some recommendations for some treatments that we can continue to make sure that nothing comes back, so we can be a little more proactive instead of having to be a little more reactive like this time. Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, absolutely. I'll do that. That's a much better resource than my pond guy. My pond guy was going to charge me.
So the next thing on our agenda is to talk about the budget.
Right, is that that's the one where the new bridge?
That's right. Yep.
And is that done?
The bridge is done.
Yep. And it's gonna be right at around the 8,000?
Yep.
Keep that in mind when we get to the city sales and use tax.
A&P. Yep. Yep.
We have no access. Is that still kind of incomplete?
Future access. Yeah. The idea is that we'll have a figure 8 trail around those two ponds, and that
Right now, it can't be used because, I mean, it'd be difficult to use as a wedding thing or pictures, or you can't get it over the end of it.
we're working on that too. Yep. That's a work in progress. I think that's something we can do in house though.
It really is nice.
It's beautiful. Yep. Yep.
There is a audience on the thing, there's also people here. You have a conversation just like this, they can't hear you. So, speak up.
Get my still teaching voice on.
There you
There
go.
you go.
Now, Kate can hear you.
What?
I can do this.
Couldn't hear him when he was
I
talking.
have to get my
It's like a
school
personal
teachers. I
conversation.
haven't done that in a long time.
There's the mic. Easier.
Oh, we have a talking stick. Is that how it's going?
I don't need a talking stick. All right, I'm gonna start with some of the budgets that are not involving any kind of personnel matter. We'll get to that last, so that if you wanted to break into an executive session, you can. I want to go through some of the easier budgets that are here that are non-controversial in form. So I'm going to go to the last page. We're going to start from the back forward. So you're going to go to page 11, the last page of that handout. It is the budget that's on the screen, in case you wanted to just follow along on the screen. And I can even do this fancy little highlight thing to show you exactly where I am. This is the Parks Inclusive Park Project. Initially, you guys have approved already a committed amount of money of $275,000 to the inclusive park, coming from your city sales and use tax. The city sales and use tax, however, when the initial budget was presented, and we didn't have the benefit of Casey being here, but he was watching, so he understood some of my concerns over the fact that you were below a $250,000 fund balance, which I consider to be my point of my threshold for contingencies, if you will. If you go below that, that kind of gives me a little bit of angst in case something were to happen. You don't have a lot of funds available, and I didn't know where that was going to come from. And we also looked at what was happening with the city sales and use tax, and luckily the last 2 months, the city sales and use tax has rebounded. So we are now 2.61% above our, we're at 6.61% growth. So when we were budgeting a 4.5%, we're now well above that. So hopefully we'll end the year at around a 2% growth above what we budgeted. That helps. We tend to be one of the two cities in this entire county that is actually experiencing that kind of growth. The others, not so much. And when their growth on sales tax is down, so does we suffer on the distribution of the county sales tax, which is also going to be impacting your operating parks O&M. because that's where the salaries are paid from, and it's using that revenue stream, the county sales tax. So the inclusive park project, by moving $275,000 and anticipating paying that this 2025 to that group, was throwing you into a really low balance. You did have the money, but you were down to about $125,000, and you needed that to be bumped up a little bit more. So the other big, large expenditure is the $600,000 that's going to the splash pad. Now that's something that will be done in the spring of 2025, and you will be needing to transfer that money. So that's an untouchable right now. That's way in the underway. This, however, might be 2026 early before they're at the point where they're at completion of this project. I don't know. So I asked Casey to look at that and just tell me how much you think or anticipate you're going to be spending or drawing, if you will, on that project for 2025. You're committed to 275, but how much in 2025 are you going to budget to actually disperse? And Casey came up with a number that he wants to talk about, I guess. Where did that come from?
This is just what I listened to the meeting, and I think part of the reason that I shifted a bunch of things to the operations side of things was to try to make up some ground on the inclusive part. But city sales and use is just not at a point to where we're able to do that right now. It's extremely lacking, and sending $275,000 to that particular project in a large lump sum next year is not feasible. This was 125,000 is just enough to where I can have a hard conversation with that group and still roll my bone, more or less.
Well, there's been some changes now since you submitted your budget. We received the numbers, like I said, for the month of November, and that collection came in much higher. So that impacted favorably your current balance in your city sales and use tax. Also, we're not going to be budgeting as aggressive for the city sales and use tax at the right now current advice of the council. They want to be a little more conservative on that and get more than having it budgeted higher and then we get less. So we're looking to do 3% right now next year growth in city sales and use tax. I think it might come in a little higher than that. However, you'll see on this budget, the 125,000 is listed there as your revenue that's coming into the inclusive park. Your balance that you have to distribute will be that 125,000, but there's some wiggle room in that. About another 90,000 could go there and still put you at $250,000 in your city sales and use tax right now. We'll talk about how that works. As far as the balance in the account, once that's distributed, you're sitting with 8,368, and that's coming from the two items up here at the top. We did receive a donation of $1,000 towards the inclusive park. Came to us. It is weird, but eventually, once they get their 501c3 status and their accounts set up, these monies will be transferred over. AMP is also giving grants to them for specific equipment for the inclusive park. And the AMP's grants are coming to this ledger in order to also be distributed. So that's why they're separated there. You have the transfer from AMP, which you don't technically control. You're just a conduit to get the money over to them. And as we have the ledger for it, and the donation is the same. So those are not something you guys can touch or decide not to do. These are things that are a placeholder for another entity or some donations coming from the community in order to pass through to them. So that's why the balance is 8,003. When this project's done, this ledger will be zero. There will be no money in the bank. It'll all just be a pass through. It's a way for us to do an accountability of that project. They maintain the other costs. I think it's well over $1 million is what they're looking at. So that group has got their own bank account for that. As far as the next one is concerned, and I don't really have a problem with that one at all. So I'll go to the splash pad, go back one page. I think this is page 10. And the splash pad, let's see, the grant in 2024 was $239,278. We have received revenue from that grant of $125,460. So that leaves a $113,000 balance that's going to be coming in 2025. That's why that's budgeted there. You are going to need the city sales and use tax transfer right now. If we go with the bidded budget, assuming there's no cost overruns on that, and the numbers are hard numbers, you get a $605,000 transfer from your city sales and use tax. And we'll do that in draws so that it doesn't decimate your cash flow. We'll do that as the contractor is submitting bills. To cover it, we'll move it from city sales and use tax. Again, this is an account that will eventually wash out. It'll be zero when that project's completed. So I'm just not going to start at January 1 and move 600,000 out of your city sales and use tax. You'll need that cash flow as the monies from city sales and use tax monthly come in. So we'll wait for them to give us an invoice for a draw from the engineering firm, and that's how that'll work. The transfer from A&P for the $20,000, you have one already in the bank, and then next year in 2025, A&P is going to transfer another $20,000. They've committed to 5 $20,000s for $100,000. That will basically pay all of your interest, but we're going to use that money to do additional paid-in capital, which will reduce your amount of interest that you'll be paying because we're going to pay it off quicker. That's what's going to happen. So your total revenue stream to this project that's remaining in 2025 is $739,000. Your expenses for the capital project is budgeted to be $889,000 with $61,400 left for professional fees. So you'll notice that your expenses will exceed the amount that you have coming in as revenue by $211,000, but that's considered already in that $750,000 loan that you already received. So when you look at what the balance is right now in the account, as of today, it's $251,000. The $211,000 off of that is $40,000 difference. That's the 2 A&P payments that eventually will move. And we'll be doing that next year for sure. We'll probably right after the budget is approved, we'll move the $20,000 as an additional paid-in capital. And then when we get the second one, we'll do it again. So that account, it should be always maintaining as we go along at the end of the year, a zero balance. The only reason it's got a balance budgeted is because of the A&P transfers. So that's a solid budget there. I mean, it's going to be zero. And if you ever wanted to know how the project's going or where are we in the payments, this ledger is the ledger that you guys should be watching every time you get your financials, is this one. And then we go to I'm going to go to the A&P. And this one you're going to help me with. So the A&P commission, what did they do? 4%? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the A&P commission met yesterday and I presented the budget to them as far as what we're projecting for growth. And we had a discussion with them. They're the experts because they're the fast food people. I mean, they know what they're budgeting as far as anticipation is for what their growth in their revenue is going to be for next year, considering their expenses as well. So when I presented the budget, I said, we budgeted 5% this year. They're at a little over 6 right now. So I said, what we need to do is I don't necessarily want to say you're going to get that next year. I budgeted a projected 4%. They liked that number. Matter of fact, to a person, they were all saying, yeah, we're kind of looking at it being about 4%. So I'm going with 4%. That does impact you guys because you get 45% of whatever that projected revenue is. Comes to you right off the top. That is that first item up here, that $107,600. That's your A&P grant revenue, 45% of what's projected. We are estimating the amount of money for December as an average amount. That could come in higher or lower. So when you approve this budget, this number, this 107, could change based on the actual receipts that we get for the month of December, for this month. So when January 1 comes around and I do the billing to Charla for the 45% check, that number, that hard number will be put into the actual calculation for the purposes of this budget. If it comes in higher than 19,000, that number will go up. Okay, because that's what we're putting in, about just slightly under 20. And then the A&P, the amount that comes in as revenue to the A&P, for it goes into your Parks A&P budget. So A&P is going to write a check to Parks A&P for 20, and then Parks A&P is going to take that money and transfer it over. We do it internally, transfer it over to your Parks splash pad. So it shows the trail. It shows it came in from A&P to the A&P ledger, and Parks A&P ledger goes back over to splash pad. So at the bottom line is the revenue stream is a little bit of a hit or miss right now. So that anytime let's say we're budgeting 4%, but it comes in, let's say it's 6%, that's going to put more money into his Freedom Fest, which you're seeing there's a large reduction in the amount that was originally budgeted there. So I'm going to go to the detail. It's on the page behind that one. I think number 9.
What number is that page?
9, I think.
9?
Yeah, if you go on the bottom right, yeah, that's the detail that's on this screen right here. The pages, by the way, Kay, the pages are, if you wanted to kind of give a glance, I don't know if you could see that, but that's what I'm showing on the screen. So the $65,500 is your largest expense. It comes from public relations and 3 major projects, and that is the Fall Festival, 3 major events, Christmas in the Park, and Freedom Fest. Christmas in the Park, however, is the money that's spent on the Christmas in the Park this year is basically the budget for next year, because we won't be paying those bills until after we close the books. So now, did you want to talk about what happened in Freedom Fest? Because that number went from 74,000 to 53,000.
We've tamed it down a little bit. Freedom Fest falls on a Friday next year. And historically, at least what I've been told, people go to the lake on Friday. And I don't think it's the best use of the money to have a gigantic blowout if no one's going to be there. So I've tamed Freedom Fest down a little bit, and that's primarily entertainment. With that large headlining act, there's a lot of ancillary charges that come along with those larger acts. So I've nixed that. We're going to choose like a mid-major, local, regional kind of somebody that we can spend $10,000 on, and that's it. We're done. They can go back home, and we're done with that. So that saved us a considerable amount of money, along with the extra demands that those larger acts have.
You want to talk about the capital improvement project?
Capital improvement projects. This typically we have Boy Scout projects in here. What I was trying to do on this, like I said before, I was trying to reduce the burden on the city sales and use tax. That fund by transferring some larger projects over to A&P, spending this $31,000 on trail project kind of takes some of the burden off that city sales and use, and I sent the Scout projects over to city sales and use. So we saved about $26,000 by moving the Boy Scout projects to city sales and use and getting that trail project in the A&P.
Fall festival and Christmas in the park and both for reduced
Right.
$1,000 and 500.
Yep.
Okay. Will you be able to put on a, will you be able to do everything that you need to
Yep.
do?
Yep. So I don't know if this is going to be met with opposition or not, but the tables, tents, and chairs are such a gigantic financial burden. And it seems like there are always mistakes made with those in the events. So if those are eliminated,
Freedom
it's
Fest?
at both Freedom and Fall Fest, that would save us about $1,500 to $2,000 on each of those events.
Will
And,
there not be tents?
sorry,
You won't have tents this year?
the vendors would be expected to bring their own tents.
Oh, you
Just-
set up for the vendors.
Exactly. That's my reaction too. We do farmers markets, we do any number of events, and I've never had the opportunity to have my own booth set up for me for free. Which is it's a really cool benefit to the vendor, but we're at a point right now where we don't have to incentivize these people to show up to our events anymore. They know that if they show up to one of these things, they're gonna get paid. So to me, there's no sense in trying to incentivize them any further to try to entice them to come. It is really convenient, but at the same time, it's expensive and it turns out to be a burden the morning of the event, just because it's like, it's just a mad dash to get everything set up, especially if you have a broken leg. So that saved us, if we eliminate that, it saves us about $3,000, $4,000, somewhere in that range. Between the two events.
Okay, and then that transfer down at the bottom.
I might also say,
Go
just
ahead.
while I'm on my soapbox, there is a little piece of entitlement when you give people the free stuff to show up. Key on our back to where if they don't show up, they have no skin in the game to show up if they're getting those things. And then when they don't show up, we're left with egg on our face by having an empty, fully set up booth. That's the logic behind it. Cool.
Okay, so when we go back to the page 8, this is how it all plays out. Your amount that you had in your A&P was in the negative. Now, realize that A&P checking is a virtual account here. It's not an actual account. So if you go overdrawn on that, while on the books, it shouldn't ever be that way. It's not where we're writing bad checks because it's covered by the actual general fund, because Parks A&P does not have a checking account. But we have a restricted account and we're supposed to manage it according to as though it is a real checking account. That's why you don't want to overdraft that. The overdraft, as we talked about for 2023, happened as a result of 2024 rather, happened as a result of an expenditure that came through in 2024 for disc golf. It was over $7,000. And that number was about what we were overdrafted, because Casey budgeted this account to be basically break even, like $25. I mean, it was supposed to be like a zero balanced account. Well, that 7,000 came in and just decimated it. So he's making strides, plus the amount of money that came in above budget is eating into that, and it basically did to the impact right now that you are $3,358 into the good in that account right now as of today. The reason that I have this new line item, budgeted revenues over expenditure, rather, for the $10,600, that's where you're going to have the excess revenue now over your expenditures. So you're in the good, you have a surplus there. So if you were to look at this account for all practical purposes, the end of next year, assuming there's no more expenses going to hit. That's why I said, remember the $8,000 for the bridge. That's going to come in against this 13. But you would have ended the year if you had no more expenses for 2024, no more revenues. It's all done and done with. You'd have 13,000 in this account at the end of the year. That's very favorable. But we know there's going to be an $8,000 invoice coming in for Liberty Park, and you're depending on where you were going to put some of your other expenditures that would come in. I don't know if some bills are still outstanding in any other area. So you would be about $5,000 in this balance at the end of the year. So that's because this is a moving document, that number you have to consider what's outstanding. But you're going to be in the positive unless you go over the $8,000 at the end of next year.
Is that our goal?
To be in the positive?
No, that amount, is that our goal?
Oh, this one, the idea is to, whenever AMP grants you the money, it's to responsibly spend it. That's why they're giving you the money. It's for these park projects. So there's no contingency fund in there. It's just stay positive in that, but not exorbitantly positive. If they give you to the tune of, I think, what was it, $100,000 for the year? Well, let's see, AMP Park, yeah. They give you $100,000 at the end of the year, and you only spent half of that. What are you doing with the other 50,000? It's almost telling them you don't really need it. And then they're going to say, well, we're only going to give you 30%, because we got people out here that are coming in and asking for grants for their projects that are outside of the scope of parks. So it benefits you to use it for what its intended purpose was and spend it down to a reasonable balance to carry over. And I would say that would be anywhere from 5,000 or less. You should be fine. Or retain 10%.
But do you have a list of what you want to spend that on next year? Is that coming?
That's the Freedom Fest.
Now,
Is that what you're asking?
are you
Or-
saying,
The 100,000?
Yeah.
yeah, it's this 65 for the public relations, 31 for the
Okay.
grant project that is our responsibility. It's the 80/20, I think. And then the 20,000 that you're transferring out, that's a wash because it's in the revenue side. So there's where your money is. Now, what he doesn't provide me that I could provide you is the makeup of what Freedom Fest 53,000 is. He's the one that maintains that. That's a subsidiary to this.
I don't know that we can go into that much detail.
I can break it out, like down to a porta potty if you guys want to see it.
Does it have sprinkler system?
Oh, yeah, they're all sprinkled. Or they have 2 foot.
Don't go there.
That's good. The
Last
potential
night's-
thinking, if there is remaining funds next year, I've been thinking really hard about purchasing the lights to light the square instead of renting them out. Now that we have
Purchasing what?
the lights for the Christmas lights for the square, right now that's contracted out. With the amount of manpower that we have now, we're almost getting to a point to where we're better suited to do it ourselves. Paying $6,500, but for some lights on the square is pretty pricey.
We own the decoration.
We do not own the lights. We only own the lights on the tree in the Santa house.
We're gonna own all of it.
Ideally, yeah. It'd be cool if Caleb just let me buy them from him.
And this 31.5 for the Arkansas Highway Grant, that's the trail.
Paving Bale Park, the gravel trail.
Which is kind of being reworked right now. But,
Yeah, do you want some details on that? Because I have some,
I don't want to.
I don't think we're getting too far into the weeds. So the state came back to Craft and Toll, the engineer on it, with some issues of grades. It's a little too steep. I thought that that project was pretty much dead in the water, just based on the communication back and forth with them. It seems like after talking to Michelle and Elliot there, it can still happen, but the engineer had to do their due diligence to make sure that it was feasible to continue with the current route. So they did some feasibility as to whether they needed to switch back or try to bench and slope to get those grades a little closer to ADA. And they're writing the state back to tell them that it's not financially feasible. For us to do switchbacks, that trail would cost probably close to $1 million, if not $750,000, somewhere in that range. Just because you'd have to cut into the side of the mountain, more or less. And then we run into issues with easement, purchasing easements. Based on what Michelle and Elliot told me, they said that if they send back notes that it's not financially feasible, we would be better off maintaining the current grades we have and just using the routing. The state ideally would come back with proceed. So our fingers are crossed right now. We have connections with Whitney Bowler-Will in that office. So I plan to send her a message sometime this week and just ask her to show us a little grace so that we can get this grant off the books, because it's been hanging around for a little bit.
This grant has gone the gamut. Yeah. We're running out of, well, can we use it for this now? Yeah. By the way, I don't know if you read, but Lori Tudor is retiring.
What?
Lori Tudor announced her retirement January of next year.
There goes our connection.
I sent the article to the mayor. So
I know.
yeah, it's true. She's been a lifesaver for us for getting things done.
Good for her.
All right, so let's go to city sales and use tax 6, I think. Page 6. Oh, should have even in there. Duh. All right, so the city sales and use tax number, again, there's 1 month that is still outstanding. This amount that's listed here at 550,000 could change. It could go up a little bit more. Again, this is a number that you're approving contingent upon this not being a material difference. But anytime if it was to go down, you'd want to look back at your expenses. But I'm anticipating this number will most likely go up. A lot of reasons. So remember, we have an estimate in there for the last month, and that number will be put more to actual and calculate on a 3% growth for next year. Yeah. So in looking at what's listed there, I made a change to the number that you had in there, and I moved back one of the numbers that was moved over from operations to help eliminate some of the cost was the contract service that we use for cleaning the pavilion. In accounting, there is a hard, fast matching concept with revenues to expenses. The revenue that's generated, cleaning is technically you've collected the money and now you're just paying it out to the lady who's cleaning it. So you're collecting $100 and $100. And when she cleans it, you pay her the $100 you collected from the people that rented it. Unless that's true. Unless there's some other side agreement. However, the revenue is generated and booked in the parks O&M. And that's because city sales and use tax ledger and funds can only maintain the interest if there's interest earned on an account. In this case, there's not. And then city sales and use tax parks distribution from the state of Arkansas is the only revenue that can be booked there because it's restricted revenue, restricted expenditures. So to meet the purpose of the actual vote and what the law was written to say. So I moved back so that when you look at the expense and it matches the revenue stream. So the revenue's there from the rentals of the pavilion and the expenses there from the actual service done. So that's the matching concept. It has to go back to match where the revenue is. So I couldn't move the revenue over here, but I can move the expense back because it's a pass through. Otherwise you'd go, where's the revenue for this? Because don't we charge them? Yes, you do. But it's really not that bad. And I'm going to show you what happened. When we originally got the budget that I was a little bit angst about, it was in the 100,000. It was like 153,000 or somewhere in that. I don't know if you have the number
No,
there. Okay. So, and even that number that you have has been modified because of the new revenue stream that we received and the moving of the $9,500 out. And then reducing the transfer to parks for the inclusive park project, this 125,000 that's sitting there. It used to be 275. So when it's all said and done, you are going to overspend your revenue stream in city sales and use tax by 488,000. The lion's share of that is the transfer for the splash pad, which you already knew was going to happen. And you already approved the reduction in that balance of that account to 250,000, no less than 250,000. That was your, on my recommendation, threshold for what you're comfortable with that account being. Well, at the current rate right now, you have 806,000 right now in the account. You're right now in a surplus situation of 146 to generate that 806,000. So if we take the 488 off of that, assuming those transfers, and by the way, you'll notice that the principal and interest on the splash pad, that's a full year now. That 137,000 is your principal, the interest is 35,000. Both of those numbers are paid out of city sales and use tax. You're going to end up the year, given all those things to be accurate and the revenue streams to be relatively close, with a probably in the neighborhood of about $310,000, $320,000. That's about 110, 120 above your 250. Now you know where I said you could actually contribute more to the inclusive park with this budget. If you wanted to just bring that down to 250, we can adjust that 125. Because the numbers are coming in very favorable. And if December comes in even more favorable, I'll have a harder number to be able to move into there. And you might be real close to doing the full 275 as we see how the revenue stream tracks next year. Remember, we're budgeting 3. If we come in at 4.5, 5, that excess money can go to that inclusive park. So I wouldn't panic on that inclusive park amount. It's there for a conservative look and a worst case scenario, but I think you could actually make it in this budget.
So I'm all for putting more towards the inclusive park and helping them complete that project sooner. But I think, we should talk about trying to pay off the loan so we don't have this debt service. I hate seeing that $30,000 of interest every year.
Here's the problem with that. You're looking at the debt, but I look at cash flow, and the cash flow is king in this case. So that debt service is a lot better than taking $500,000 and just giving it up there, because that would decimate you. You wouldn't have money. So the debt service is a palatable expense for you for a 5-year period. So you could throw additional above that. Well, I know you don't. It's no different than we need $7 million for the water sewer department. So we're going to go get a bond for it. But the debt service on the bond is a cash flow issue. If they took $7 million out of their $6.8 million right now and use that instead of getting a bond, we have nothing in the bank. You follow what I'm saying? The debt service, while it looks high, that's only a 5-year commitment. When you pay that interest at $35,000, it's $100,000 over that period of time. A&P's taking care of that. It's on your books, but you're getting the 20,000 benefit.
Okay,
So
so we're paying more.
we're going to be paying that as additional paid in capital and lower that expense by about 100 grand
Basically making $20,000 in extra payments
per year for 5 years. 20,000 each year for 5 years.
So we'll pay it off in 4 years.
Exactly. You're going to be reducing the period. So the cash flow right now is huge to me because you don't have that money just sitting around idle. There's no idle cash in this budget.
When we go after these loans and get loans, are we shopping them around the different banks?
Good question.
There's a lot of politics
I like that.
involved in that.
I like that question.
We've got a lot of banks that want our money.
Yeah.
Our service for business, so.
No.
I'm 100% behind that
So
question.
am I.
The answer to that one is when I first came here, there was there's a lot of issues with I'm going to call it in a crude term, like what would be a sacred cow, and that would be one. They are Greenwood. They are homegrown. They are, there's a whole bunch of reasons why you wouldn't want to give it to a bank that only has a branch here and isn't their headquarters, and they do Greenwood right. And there's a lot of argument that you could go from the political side of it that supports that, and they do well by us. I mean, they give us good rates, but I'm from the same school you are, that you should always have, put it out for bid. And plus, we have all our eggs in one basket right now. So we have to collateralize what's above the FDIC's insurability line, which means they have to go out and they have to invest that and collateralize our monies that are in the bank. And when you have $17 million in the bank, it's all in one bank. If that bank were to go bye-bye, we stand to lose in the secondary market of that investment. Secondary collateralization is at risk. So there's some money out there, and it's reported in our audit reports every year that we're at risk for. The way you get around that is you divest certain funds to other banks. You would take water sewer, for instance, take that money and put it in another bank. So you lower your collateralization risk.
But
I've already
above
given
our
that.
pay grade is what you're saying.
I've already given that
Yeah.
speech.
It is kind of nice to just pick up the phone and call the VP of the bank and say, hey, we need an operating loan for $750,000. What's your interest rate? He gives you an interest rate, and then they just write the paperwork. There's a layer of convenience there too, that is just kind of nice.
Let's put it this way, there's a good working relationship they have already established with the city. Other banks would be, I don't know, waffling, but we're not sure that's the case. I'm just saying it's a lot of politics in that, but I loved your question. It was excellent. So anyway, so there's your city sales and use tax. It's not as gruesome as it once looked to be. And I think we can rebound on that inclusive park project as the city sales and use tax might come in above the 3% that we're conservatively budgeting. You look like you had a question. Okay, good.
Can you change something while you have it?
What's that?
On city sales and use tax, service contract, mowing and landscaping.
You want the line item changed?
Yeah, the actual breakdown. The new 19 acres, that was just an estimate. Can you change it to 15,600?
Well, now you don't have any money for I'm just kidding. So the change that was just made is on the page 7. It's down on the line item, service contract, park mowing and landscaping. And what he asked me to do, the number that was originally there was an estimate. And so this line item right here, new 19 acres Bell Park, went to 15,600. That's the actual number that came in on the quote.
Can we talk about that? I mean,
Absolutely.
clear that it seems like an enormous amount for lawn care, for the year. and I understand, I mean, there's a lot to mow. Would it be more cost effective to hire someone into the city, and that's what they do year round? And, you know, you've got a couple mowers, and they, you know, they may contract it out, whatever, but you pay someone, you know, $40,000 a year to be in charge of mowing.
That's kind of been the driving force to try to add people to staff. I think we're at a point now to where we probably need one more person to make that happen. I know, Greenview, they go up there, I think they have 6 to 8 guys that mow. And they have 2 or 3 guys on leaf blowers, 2 or 3 guys on string trimmers, and then mowers. It's an all-day affair. Yeah.
And just weren't able to keep up with as we could, keep up with all, I mean, because we're taking care of the trails, they're maintaining the trails and all the other, the neighborhood parks. I don't know what all you do.
They do have
So,
they have some time. I mean, it's not like they're sitting on their hands, you know, by the end of the week, but they have some extra time, but it's no different than most any other job. They're not slammed. You know, they're comfortable in working. I've starting to kick around the idea of just starting with the square and letting them mow the square. Because it's not like mowing the square is specialized, but I think that contract runs for another year. So we're locked in on that. Once that contract is up, then yeah, let's go ahead and just start mowing downtown. I mean, the hardest part is having a ramp over the veterans stones. The rest is just mowing.
Do we have the equipment?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The only thing that's really that's not even specialized, but they have a stand-up mower that gives a little bit more ground clearance. It's just a little bit easier to maneuver. But you could do that with the 0 turn.
I think one item we need to be looking at is this tree giveaway program. Greenview Lawns, budgets it at $4,000. That's what I think you have an agreement with. What's not in there is the tax. That's what we're gonna have to go back and adjust that to the tax.
Yeah, I think you overran it by.
It was exactly the tax. It was 4,000 plus tax.
444.
We want to do that calculation. It's,
Yeah, it was like 43, 40 or something like that.
380. So it's 4380. So I think we're going to write that in there. Yeah. So this number changed to 4380 for the tree giveaway.
And we'll make it for the hanging baskets because we typically come in under budget on those.
I don't know if you heard that, but he said that they could probably make that up from the hanging baskets when they purchase those. They come in typically under that $3,000 mark. So, and with those on the fly adjustments, we're still down to 317,000. So those were immaterial changes. These numbers are as of today. So when you're looking at what we've already processed, you can basically see, we're budgeting 10 grand in the maintenance repair for playground equipment. We've spent so far this year 4416. So, these are some room too. You have the maintenance repairs building at 17 versus 5212. I mean, I don't know. You got some buildings that
Utility charge that 8,000 for the Liberty Park pond clearing.
you're going, oh, yes, that's true. But that's going to be this year though, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And you're gonna do it to this or to maintenance repairs? Okay,
That's kind of what I was.
all right, that's fine. That's fine. Good. Enough said. All right. Okay, so that, if, for those rolling forward, I want to go to the page 1. Actually, it'll be 2. I want to go to page 2 on the bottom right-hand corner, because that's the second page of, it gives you down at the very bottom, the fund balance budget. So right now, you're going to see that for the amount of funds that you control, which are actual restricted amounts of money, there are 4 accounts. There's the city sales and use tax parks, parks A&P grant, splash pad fund, and inclusive park. The splash pad fund and the inclusive park will be 0. You have limited control over that. There is specific restricted purposes for those. But all in, you're at $379,000. Right now, 13 will drop by 8 for the bridge. So you'll end up with 8,000 less. So you'll be at about 371. What we're going to be talking about probably after you do your, if you choose to go to an executive session, the park's operating, because that's right now sitting at 46,000 in deficit spend. Now that money is all general funded. General will have to come up with that amount of money to allow you to balance that budget, because all the budgets have to be balanced. So if you're operating outside of your revenue stream, that has to be made up by the general fund. So if you look at the revenue stream, the top line on the page 1, this 249,000 is well below the 263 that we budgeted. It is a little bit higher because we're projecting it to be higher than what we've actually collected. We're still 1 collection away. This 227 is still awaiting for the collection in the month of December, which we get at the end of the year. So that number is going to go up by hopefully 40, run about $50,000. So we're going to be budgeting flat, which means, and we're not going to hit flat this year. We're actually going to be lower than flat. Whatever we collected this year, that's what we're budgeting for next year. No growth. So that's another moving target. I can tell you there's one item in here, this retirement fund. If you go back to the first page, and it might even be on your second page. I don't know where retirement fund comes in. Second page. It's on page 2. Go down to the retirement fund. These accounts are listed in alphabetical order. So you look at retirement fund. We have spent so far this year in that retirement fund $4,257. That's because there was turnover. 2 actually. We're budgeting 10,000. That seems a little high, and I'm going to tell you why that happens. That happens because we do 7.5% times the salaries for the individual. That's what we do. We contribute to the retirement plan 7.5% of the year-end salary. It's because you have to be employed as of the end of the year, and you have to be employed. You don't get your distribution for a year. So he has 2 new hires that will not be eligible in 2025 for a distribution. They're factored in here. So I can remove them and lower that $10,000 by the people that are here that will qualify, him being one, and one of your employees, I think one of the Jeffs. So that number's high. I just wanted you to know, to know that. So now you can, another thing is, you're looking at that 10 grand there. We only gave them 75. That was your budget.
I mean, after the Liberty Park thing, I'm a little more inclined to give them 75.
That's what I'm saying. You understand? I mean, they don't know any of this yet. This hasn't been approved, but you wanting to increase it? Are you going to utilize them more?
Well, that was the goal. Yeah.
Well, they're gonna keep putting you off and.
That's kind of how, that's, yeah,
Drop it to 75?
yeah.
Done. Gonna do it, gonna do it. So now we're at the point where we go through line by line and start looking at some of the capital stuff, but you also have the big item, and that is the salaries. If there is a time you want to do it, you might want to do it now. Unless you're just wanting to discuss it out.
Do we have a motion to go into a executive session?
Yes.
I'll mention to go into the-
Do you have a second?
Can I say something before you go? Do you mind?
Oh, sure.
Tom mentioned raises for Jeff Bean and Eric.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. I just don't know how to make that work next year. Whether they get 1.5% or, because they're higher on dates.
July.
We're too late in the year this year for me.
But you can
to
give them the
increase
increase
their pay,
in
but-
July or August.
See, and that's fine. I just didn't want to get flip-flopped.
Oh, no, you can put a placeholder there for an incentive increase, and then it would be,
Just keep it in July.
yeah.
Would it be like that?
No, you would factor
use
that
going
in. You would do
forward,
a 6-month
Got it.
factor and
So they
then
would get a bump in July and then
Mhm.
we would just start.
start
canceling.
cleaning the next year.
All right.
So whatever you would say the annual increase would be, you have that.
Those two guys are they are running the parks department right now. Those two guys are. So they deserve however much you're willing to give them, that's what they do. I would give them the max. Because they are saving our tail ends right now.
I know the square looks really pretty.
Square looks good. The trail, they have busted their tails mowing the trails, trying to make sure those things are maintained in pristine condition. And they do a fantastic job. So,
I'm going to call vote for the executive session. Mr. Edwards? The vote to go to executive session.
Okay, I'll do that.
Did you say yes? Ms. Martin?
Yes.
Ms. Travis?
Yes.
Ms. Headley? Ms. Bell? We are paused for executive session then.
We need to All right.
You're talking about Hawaiian him.
We are, okay, we are come back from executive session. When, I don't know how to say it exactly, do I just say what we did?
Yeah, you can say the action that the commission took.
The action that the commission took is that we discussed, we have decided to give across the board 1.5% raises to everyone. We would like to, the Jeff B. and Eric, is there a way that we could do that starting in July? Once they do that, starting in July, they can get a 1.5% raise. So we did a 1.5% raise across the board for everyone.
Calculate the other way. If I put in a dollar, it would tell you it's 1.5%. And then, and I'll put that that's effective on Jeff B. and Eric in July.
When it, is that when they?
That's
become
their
eligible?
anniversary month.
Okay, yes.
We'll do that first pay period in July. And then I'll calculate what that does as far as the, I'll project that for the half year rather than the full year. So the dollar amount that'll go in there. See, if I put in 1.5% right now, it's gonna calculate that as an annual and it'll do the whole thing. Do you want 1.5% to be given to them? In 6 months, it's gonna change that 1.5%. I'll calculate what 1.5% is, but then I'm gonna put it in only for 6 months. So that'll reduce the annual.
Why don't you give them 0.75 for the entire year?
That's, well, yeah, you can do that.
It wind up being a little
But
bit
if I do
more.
0.75, it budgets correctly. You just,
Whatever you have.
Well, we have, okay, I'll make a motion, we do that.
You got the money to do it? I guess we do.
We're not changing money, are we?
It's like,
nothing.
Okay,
I mean,
so the incentive is for these guys to work for a year when they receive this 1.5.
He wasn't giving them an increase, and if he didn't give them an increase this year for 2025, they would have gone, before they hit their first incentive, they would have gone a year and a half before they would get any incentive. That's what my concern was. So what he's saying is, they hadn't worked long enough for them to just carte blanche get a full incentive.
that's why,
So,
that's why we did what we did.
but if you're gonna give them 1.5% for 6 months, you might as well give them 0.75%
for the whole year.
for a year.
It's the
They've
same
been
amount.
here a year is what you're saying. They've worked for a
In
year.
July, they would have been.
Oh, I got you.
That's their anniversary.
And they'll keep that 0.75 all year. That's right. We'll do all this next year.
But then
I was thinking it was.
That way.
Yeah, that's.
No, no.
That'll be whatever.
75%.
I want you. No, that's not what I
Should
do.
be 0.75.
No, it's 7.5.
No, it's not right.
Oh.
0 point.
You, yeah.
There we go. Remember, it doesn't calculate that way. The way it works is I put in a dollar amount and it tells me.
Yeah.
I'm doing it backwards. But, you would also, that 2.89 would be 1.5.
So basically, what we're doing, we're giving the, number two, number one, year, 4 years. All year.
That's right, 1.5 for 6 months.
But you're gonna give it to them over 12 months. See what I did? Put in the 903 and it gives me 1.5%.
Put it into that down on the bottom.
Because I put in the percentage. I'll calculate it and then,
Okay.
yeah. But I wanted you to see what that does, what the number is. It's just under, it's $100, basically under $1,000. Also, one thing you need to be looking at is this federal COLA 2.5, that moves the max. So it already has, that revised max is up by 2.5%. The 2.3 is Arkansas's COLA. So we don't know what we'll know tomorrow night because we're doing our first budget and they'll put in a placeholder there and I'll have a barometer as to how much they're looking at doing, if any. So that 2.3 is just a placeholder right now to put a dollar amount to it. So the number of his current 2024 salary plus the incentive plus the COLA brings his base rate of pay to 62,480. So you can get numbers to it.
Does that bring the budget where they can maybe approve it tonight?
We're getting there. I mean, we need to go through some of the line items that Casey would like to talk about.
Gotcha.
Operationally. But when I get these numbers put in, we're at 43,000. We could float that through the general side and see what happens.
How do you feel about that? Maybe is there something there you think we can adjust or?
I mean, no,
I'm gonna take down the retirement fund
even,
to more reasonable.
even with this, I've removed,
What page do you want?
oops, sorry, let me look at the number of pages here.
You're gonna lose a lot of this.
Page 5.
Page 5.
So if you look where it says carryover, 3/4 down the page, I removed the shade coverings for the splash pad. And removed the paving, the parking lot in Bell Park.
So that's already out, you've already pulled that out.
Right. There,
That's-
see the date over on it?
Yeah.
That's the year that is gonna be put back.
That kind of came into the needs and wants category, asking on the ask for operations side.
So that
Now,
splash pad, will have any coverage.
well, it is in the plans, but it just didn't make sense,
Not this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
at least asking on the operations side.
That's fine.
Now, if you wanted to trade you could probably do a trade for shade covering, shade structures for the little mini truck that's in there. So trade 35,000 for 27,000.
Just how important is it? Or you,
It's probably more of a want than a need, but erring on the side than need.
Can you do that in
Can we
26?
not put that one in?
I think that the shade coverings would be more important than a truck.
I personally do too. A lot.
You know, it's $8,000 you're asking, another $8,000 you're asking for.
Yeah. Sorry, I like what you said.
I can suggest, let me just do it. 27.5.
That was the best amount I got.
Areas that cover, you got the rest of it.
That's for picnic tables, benches, and shade coverings.
You have to have 100 years there. they're sitting on the benches. I mean, walking
Yeah,
down the street at 100 degrees.
Still have to find $7,500.
Yeah.
I can do my best sales pitch with the council to see if they,
Where is the? Where's the building? Is that under
Turn the heat up. Can you feel it?
hear it, can't wait.
I feel it a little up here.
the cleaning and the staining.
City self-use.
Under city self-use tax.
Line items, about 405 maintenance and repair. $70,000.
That's not gonna help you either. We are gonna have special election expense, not special election expense, excuse me, general election expense, that'll come in early next year, won't it? The general election bill that we just had,
Yeah.
that should come in around the first quarter of next year, right? So there's nothing budgeted in there, but I'm gonna have to put something in there.
It was probably, isn't it? It's probably around $14,000 now, maybe
For
16.
the city.
Yep, our portion.
What do we do?
It's
Every department pays for that. What does it cost to do it? It costs more to do a special election.
I don't know, I think that's kind of the best way to shift things.
Okay, because you have now a little bit more of a surplus, there's possibility you could minimize this impact by moving some other stuff back over to the city self-use tax. So we can look at that. One of the things that I would say is move off the Hatsu and then take the shade covering and put it in city self-use.
Yeah.
I would really like to see that. I need to get my voice.
Would you really like to see that, Otis?
I would like to see it.
Okay. Under capital, which is still about 350.
It's an overestimate.
Yeah, 282. That would look like, you're still under 250, still very solid. Good little wagon. So now you're down there very reasonable, down to 15, which is good. That's solid.
Is there anything else? You're doing good today?
Charlotte, do they need a vote?
Yep, and that way we can put it in tomorrow night's study session
I make a motion to accept the current budget as presented.
and discuss with changes discussed. Yeah. Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mrs. Travis,
Yes.
Mrs. Headley, Mrs. Bell.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Much better.
Do I have a motion to, okay.
I was going to say, I appreciate it. I was expecting to have to work harder.
We will.
You guys
Yeah.
did it more, so I didn't really, I was pleasantly surprised when you presented that we didn't have more.
Well, Tom nailed it, and I just shifted a couple things around, so. He made it pretty easy.
Because you're talking about the Fourth of July, the year, and actually, you know, so that might be kind of a
Same situation.
nice situation.
Yeah.
Then Sunday become interesting.
I know. Because whenever we first started doing this, I got some hot water for suggesting that we have this on July 1st on Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
was like World War III.
I remember that.
I got a call late at night. No. So, and I said, what do you do the 4th of July? Oh, we're on Friday. Well, we have it on Friday. Okay. I don't know what you do on Saturday, Sunday. Do you know, Charlotte?
Do what?
What have we done for Freedom Fest that falls on a Sunday?
We did it the Saturday before.
Oh, really? So 2 Saturdays in a row.
That's what I remember.
I think that's fine. We haven't had it on Sunday.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Dave made the motion.
And-
Who said second?
Okay, gotcha.
All right.
We're done.
You guys.
Yeah.
Heard. Now, maybe I'll call my wife.
We were here till 10.